All right, we're rolling, I think. Light is blinking. All right, so let's, any questions before we talk about something that all of you can do, but probably never thought about in terms of physics? Any questions? All right, so it's nice if the door comes inwards. So it's instead, how easily does this rotate? Oh, they fix it so you can't. We'll do the door. If I want to close the door, how do I do that? Push and pull it?
Push or pull it.
That didn't seem to work.
At the farthest end from the pivot point.
Sorry?
At the farthest end from the pivot point.
All right, Amina, I think you're gonna have to be the witness. So just push on it, pull on it.
On that door, push on the,
Farthest from the pivot point.
on the section that, on the back end of the farthest from the pivot point.
So, Amina, or I guess, we got three witnesses here. Pushing on the end farthest from the pivot point.
Not the end, the other side of the back end of the pivot.
What do you mean the back end? Isn't this the back end here? I have a door and a marker then. Classroom. Door. Where am I pushing it? I'm pushing it here,
Yes. In that,
farthest from the pivot point. That, I'm just making sure I understand exactly what you're saying. So pushing like
yes,
that direction.
yes.
Then I push, again, on that side of the door, farthest from the pivot point, can I push in that direction?
No.
No, I have to be straight in. Or straight. Perpendicular.
It can be like that.
It can be, but you can't push on that corner. You have to push on, it's not how you push, it's where you push, and you have to be on the back side.
Okay, on the back side.
Uh-huh.
Not, this wasn't on the corner, this was
Oh, okay.
just slightly in.
Then yes, you can.
I can, so it doesn't have to be perpendicular.
I think it has to be. I don't know.
Are you questioning it just because I keep asking questions?
Yes.
Was that, I heard Isabel, did you?
Push it like about the circumference, you know, like move from away the circumference.
Okay, tangent to the path.
Yeah, the half of the circumference.
Okay, so you're saying perpendicular.
I guess that's.
And you're not, you were sure, but you suddenly were not sure. I do have to give them the door some, just because I'm not that skinny. All right, so we got three witnesses there. So pushing on the back side of it. Did it close?
It moved.
It did move. Okay. Why did it not close?
You didn't continue the motion.
You didn't push
Like,
right into the
When you
door.
close the door, you push it all the way, you make sure your hand's on it the entire time? I mean, it's great for slamming the door, but,
No, no slamming doors.
yeah. Flashback, my brother had an English teacher who was a World War II vet, and he slammed the door, my impression was it was not on purpose, it was just, it closed faster than he expected. And it immediately triggered a little shell shock in him. And he then went off and yelled at all the students because of trauma. So anyway, there's my slamming door story. So anyway, no slamming doors, okay? But if I wanted to close it just with a single push, what?
You would need more force.
Okay. So let's think about the things that have now just been said, the things that are necessary to close the door. Where I push matters. You were saying farthest from the axis or hinge. Because I think, and then, so distance from hinge, or distance from, it goes by a couple names. For a door, it's a hinge. In general, it's called the axis of rotation, or I will sometimes refer to it as pivot point. So I'll write down pivot point, axis of rotation. All right, how hard I push. Matters. And the direction of the push matters. Wouldn't it be nice if there's just a nice simple way of writing all of that in just a couple of letters? Because physics is a nice subject, and of course we've done that. So how far, where I push matters. Basically, how far am I from the hinge? This is known as the lever arm or moment arm. I think Hewitt calls it the lever arm. I tend to call it the moment arm. Just recognize it's the same thing. And the symbol that we use for it is R. And it is a vector quantity. Obviously, how hard I push and the direction I'm pushing is a force. So this is force. And there's a combination between it also bundled up into the direction of the push relative to the door. I mean, when the door was closed or open all the way, I need to push that way most efficiently. However, pushing that way doesn't always work to close the door. It all depends on which way the door is oriented. So how the force is, the direction that you push relative to the moment arm actually becomes critical, and this is summarized by an X. That's not a variable, that's a multiplication symbol. So we have this thing, so an R cross F. This is known as a cross product. With work, you dealt with a dot product because you care about how much of the force is in the direction of movement. With this, we care about how much is perpendicular. So this cares about perpendicular. So when I push on the end of the door, so go back to my door here, that's my door right there. If I push that way, it's not particularly efficient because I'm not pushing perpendicular to my moment arm. That would be my moment arm. This is a vector from the pivot point to where the force is applied. Now, this R cross F, of course, we have to give it a name as opposed to, you can't just go around saying R cross F everywhere. You need a one single word to cover it, and that is torque. That, the letter I use there is a tau. A tau, Greek letter. Yet one more rotational quantity using Greek letter. Now, you will sometimes see reference in the materials. There's a lab I use this in, and probably a couple other places, where I will sometimes refer to torque as G2 Kumbuka. This was an obscure clue when it was more recent, in the late 80s. But I did have a student a couple of years ago who actually knew the reference. I was shocked. Anyway, I'm not going to explain the reference to you. But the moral is, he understood the reference because he listened to what his father told him. I thought that was the important part of it. Only my kids learn that. So, notice that we have torque here as, it's a vector. So if I'm closing the door, what's the direction of the torque? And this gets into another question related to it. As I rotate this, what is the direction of the angular velocity? So let's spend a little time just talking about the direction of these vectors here. So as this rotates, what is the direction of the angular velocity?
Counterclockwise?
Sorry?
Counterclockwise?
It was clockwise to me. Is she right? Is it counterclockwise, or am I right? It's clockwise.
Relative to what?
It's depends on your orientation.
Yeah, that really is going to be inconvenient when you're describing vectors by going, it's clockwise, but only if you're standing in the main part of the room. And the room is, in this is the southwest corner of the tech building, Forsyth Tech. Surely there's a simpler way. Yes, it is. So clockwise, counterclockwise, and sometimes it's convenient to use in terms of clockwise and counterclockwise if you can be sure that everybody's looking at it from the same point of view. But you can't always be sure of that. What about in case of the door? If it's closing, what would you say that is? Clockwise or counterclockwise if you wanted to go that route?
Well, you'd have to be looking at it from up top.
So you're still getting into the descriptions of your point of view.
Yeah.
And typically, it is from an overhead point of view. When you deal in cards and you talk about clockwise, typically it is from, or counterclockwise, it's from an overhead point of view. However, in physics, we can't guarantee that that's always the point of view. So in their infinite wisdom, they came up with what is known as a right-hand rule. There are several right-hand rules, all stemming based on cross products here, but if you can bend your thumb way back, what I'm about to show you is just a way of keeping track of it. If your thumb bends way back, that does not alter the math or the physics, that's just you. So, the thumb, pretend the thumb is along the line of the axle. So this right here, my axle is right here, so that means my thumb is going to point out towards you or point towards me. Then you want your fingers to curl in the direction of that it's rotating. So my thumb is either pointing that way or that way, but the way it's rotating around like that. So my thumb has to point towards me. So the angular velocity of this wheel is pointing that way, pointing east. It is just a way of keeping track. So assuming that really is east that way, if I said I had a wheel spinning in class, the angular velocity was pointing east, then anyone who understands the convention knows, oh, okay, so it's spinning around like that if you're facing west. If I spin around like that, what is the direction of the angular velocity?
South.
Pardon?
Down.
All right, I've had one up and one down. It is one of those two.
North?
You said north? It is not going to be north. It will be up or down. All right, so my thumb either is pointing up or down because that's the axle. And it's rotating around like this. So, down. Now, when I was first doing physics and I was being told this, I got really confused because, like, if I close the door, my axle is the hinges, so my thumb's pointing up or down, and the door's closing this way. So if that door closes, the angular velocity of the door is up. And I looked at that and I'm thinking, what's going up? I cannot picture anything that's going up as the door swings like this. And then eventually realized there's nothing going up. It is the only thing going up really is just the vector. It is just the way that the powers that be decided they were going to do it. So we would say that when that door closes, the angular velocity, the torque also is up, and that is just indicating that it's rotating like that. So, in that way. All right, Kimberly, you had your hand up. Did you have a question?
The angular velocity is the middle. The angular velocity is the middle. It's not like the way
The angular velocity of the wheel right now is pointing that way.
So any object, you have to see where it's pointed at instead of how it's moving.
Well, you're taking both into account, because as it's spinning like this, the thumb acts, pretend the thumb's my axle. So since my axle's running this way, my thumb's pointing like that or like that. And then I want my fingers to curl in the direction of the actual movement about the axle. So since it's spinning around like that, spinning around like that, the thumb points that way. If I spin it like this, my thumb has to point outwards for my fingers to curl in the direction of this rotating. So that angular velocity is that way.
Okay.
I applied a torque in that direction to get it to accelerate in that direction. Have angular acceleration in that direction to give it an angular velocity in that direction.
So you have to apply a torque for it to do that?
You have to apply, you require us to apply a net force to get regular acceleration. You have to apply a torque to get angular acceleration.
Okay.
It is the rotational analog of force. An influence that might cause angular acceleration. That's torque.
So when you had like the up and down example, how does so is it just like both, sorry, I'm trying to like understand that way, so like if both thumbs are up, then it's that way, cause like, your thumb is.
All right, so it's like, okay, first off, and didn't see anybody do this, it is the right hand rule, it is not the dominant hand rule. I've had students use their left hands for this and be completely backwards. It is the right hand rule. If you don't like it, get to a position of power and change it, but until then. All right, so as it's rotating around like that, again, my axle is vertical, so my thumb will either point up or down. And I want my fingers to curl in the direction that it's spinning around the axle.
So you don't use your left hand?
No.
Okay.
Now, sometimes the student is so dominantly left-handed that that's immediately their go-to. So either they have to break that habit and go to the right-hand rule, or some do the left-hand rule and know the answer is the opposite of whatever their left hand tells them. Yes?
What is the F again for torque?
F? Force.
Oh, just right above.
Yeah, this force. Now, when I have a cross product here, R cross F is not the same as F cross R. With a dot product or most multiplication, you can just switch the order. You cannot switch the order here. For the math purists, the commutative property of multiplication does not hold with the cross product. The way you do that, so I got my door here with a hinge right there. I push on a force in that direction. There's my force. My lever arm, or moment arm, is a vector from my hinge to where the force is applied. That's my R. And if I want to figure out the direction of the torque, again, one, I can think through and go, well, I know that door, if I do this, that door is going to swing like that. So my torque would be out. Or, I put them tail to tail. Wait, hold on, something's off here.
Force vectors,
Yeah, I flip this around. R is going that way, F is going this way. Or, again, right hand rule. R comes first, so I put my hand in the direction of R. I basically have 360 that I can turn my hand, still pointing in that direction. I want it so that when I bend my fingers, it bends the fastest way to the second vector. So if it's like that, fastest way to the second vector is that way, thumb points out. So this would cause torque outwards, or again over here, that's my hinge, I push on the door, it would cause the door to swing like that, outward torque. I think there's one of the homework questions from the textbook which talks about, does the direction of force matter? Well, yes, very much so. If I had pushed at an angle, when I was trying to see if Elaine was fine with my pushing the door in that direction, it would definitely weaken the push. Because if I went at an angle like that, part of my force is perpendicular and part of my force is smack dab at it. The only part of the force that would have any effect is the part of the force that is actually perpendicular. So I can break a force up into its components. That's the part of the force that would actually cause torque. This doesn't do anything with torque. Okay, questions here before we do a nice simple problem? Let's do a nice simple problem. So let's go back to the perpendicular here. Simplify it that way. 4 newtons, that is perpendicular, and 3 meters. What is the torque applied to that door? I think somebody just said it. Okay, 12. If they're perpendicular, you just multiply them straight up. 12 what? Close.